do what you like, find your passion, ask for help, be humble. Basically, be very humble. Learn as much as you can from as many experts as you can, and then you will be confident because you'll have learned more than anyone else.
Welcome back to the Mark Faris Experience. Today, guys, we have a real treat for you. We have Dr. Maristany. He is a genius when it comes to the medical field. He recently launched his own practice, Maristany Medical, and he has over 450 patients. He oversees 4 staff, and he is, I would say, he's the smartest individual when it comes to medical that I've met, and he's helped me personally and my family as well. Dr. Maristany, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I appreciate that amazing introduction, and I'm very happy to be here.
Let's go back to your backstory and maybe you could share a little bit about, what got you into the medical field and then the functional medicine side of it as well. I know you have a really good story that led into that particular field in the medical field as well.
Sure. So I was a very traditionally trained MD in internal medicine, and I had a great life. I worked 7 days on, 7 days off. I was in a hospital in Melbourne, Florida. The east coast of Florida is one of the only places that you can actually surf. And so I literally worked 7 days, surfed 7 days, worked 7 days, and then took a vacation. It was an amazing lifestyle in traditional trained practice. But then I realized that there was a huge need for root cause medicine. And so one of my colleagues, who's an ER doctor at the time, she retires and has this amazing multi-million dollar practice. And all of a sudden, all these people are flying in to see her from all over the world in all these private jets. And I'm like, what are you doing? Are you selling snake oil? Like, I don't understand what's going on here. I thought it was kind of unique, and I wanted to know more from a business standpoint. It seemed very successful, but more importantly, I want to see if there was value and something I could actually align with. So I went and shadowed her and realized that she was actually curing people of chronic lifelong disease, and that you could cure people, something that we weren't really taught in medical school. We were taught we can patch any disease in the world with myriad of medications, but to actually reverse disease is a lot harder, and you have to understand a little bit more of biology, chemistry, and science. And it's not necessarily taught to you. So I said, let me shadow her, and then she got trained through the Cleveland Clinic in the Internal Institute for Functional Medicine. So I followed in her footsteps. Also got certified through the Institute for Functional Medicine. Again, vetted through the Cleveland Clinic. There's only 1,200 of us in the entire world that actually know how to do this. It's an emerging field. It's taught in some Ivy League institutions like Johns Hopkins and Harvard. It will eventually be standard of care. The only problem is it's a little bit more it's expensive initially. The Cleveland Clinic actually did a study on thousands of patients that they enrolled in Ohio, and they said if you spend about $4,000 initially on the patient, you save about $40,000 a year. But most companies are not seeing that there's too short-sighted. They want to help their shareholders, and they don't want to take that $4,000 hit up front.
Right.
When you apply that to millions of patients, it's a big hit. So I think that's kind of the problem, is that we've democratized our healthcare system.
Hmm.
And so it's not always doing the best for our patients. But a lot of people, regardless of this, of who's paying for these services, like all my services are cash, they're just going to spend the money because they want to get better.
Mm.
So that's where we are, and that's what kind of motivated me to get to where I am. And then once I got trained, I started applying the science, thinking I could always fall back to surfing and having 27 weeks off of vacation per year, which is pretty attractive to anyone. But then I realized that I could help people, and that was my calling. And I just kept doing it. It's addictive. I mean, it's very gratifying. You don't want to stop. And that's where I had to figure out, like from a business standpoint, how do I take this incredible passion and make it, reality?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So I have my own personal experience. So up in Canada, I was going through something. I wasn't sure what I was going through. I had, some personal health that I was going against. I wasn't sure. And I actually came to you and you were able to identify it very quickly. And then I had another family member that I said, listen, you got to go see Dr. Maristany. And then you were able to identify something and help solve that challenge as well. And so my question to you is, what do you think makes you such an expert in the field? Like, why is it that you're able to say identify some of these challenges. And I mean, you have example after example. Whenever we speak, you're like, hey, we found this, we found this. They were, going through health challenges. They didn't know what it was for years. We identified it and we solved it. What do you think you have that makes you stand out, that you have that kind of, I don't know if it's intuition, but what are some of the traits that the listeners can really, maybe grab onto, that can make themselves like the master in their role, or in their business, like you are in the medical field?
So the distinguishing, that's a key thing to the only reason I'm successful is because I add value, a lot of value to patients' lives. And the question is, what is that value? What am I doing different than other doctors? You can go to 10 other doctors. My average sick patient has already seen 5 to 10 doctors before they come to me. They've already been to Harvard, Johns Hopkins, they've been to Northwestern, they've been to all these amazing Ivy League institutions. It's because their narrow based focus is symptom control. So, for example, I have a patient who I can talk about him because he literally told the world his story, and you guys can look this up for yourself. It's pretty fascinating. His name is Dr. Brian Kornblatt. If you Google that name and then put keynote speech, you'll see that when he was in Toronto giving the keynote speech at a tech conference, he then decides for about 13 minutes to tell about his own life. And he actually got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is a terrible autoimmune disease. This guy was in the prime of his life, mid 40s, with MS, one of the smartest MD, PhDs you'll ever meet, Johns Hopkins grade researcher. He had access to the best doctors at Johns Hopkins, and they gave him a biological agent called Ocrevus, which was the appropriate call. It turned off all his symptoms. He felt fine. But then, because Ocrevus is a biologic agent that can reduce your immune system, he had some colds, and he'd always get sick around family, and he was constantly battling this sick, a coldness. He kind of felt a little tired. He just wasn't feeling himself. And he said, if there's another option, because his MS was kind of mild, let me explore that. And so that's next thing you know, my colleague from Harvard referred him to me, and then his name was Brian. I said, Brian, let's look at a couple environmental factors that no one else has looked at, and that's where I provide value because I went out of my way to get trained in a niche, which is functional medicine, which again is super rare. So, as a business owner, if you can get trained in a rare field that no one else knows things about, you're going to distinguish yourself. Because then he comes to me and says, hey, run the tests that no one else has run. These are not even FDA approved. What that means is they're accurate, they're CLIA certified, but they're not standard of care, which means it won't be reimbursed by insurance, which means you have to pay cash for them. So he paid, I think, $500 for a toxin test, identified multiple immune irritants like benzene and other chemicals that were in the system. And oh, by the way, his parents both had some issues, and his friend had issues, and they were all because they were from a cancer hotbed in Maryland. Tons of toxins in the water and environment. But guess what? Traditional doctors don't know how to check those tests because they're not standard of care, which just blows my mind. So all we're doing is we're trained to look deeper at environmental causes of disease, which we think like RFK is going to be a big proponent of that. I think the political situation is going to shift in that favor big time right now. Thank God. And maybe this will all be covered by insurance next year. So that's kind of how we do our business. We figure, look, we can provide a niche care and something that's needed, and it's so needed that literally we don't have to advertise, and we are booked out for infinity.
Yeah.
But because you have to provide a very specialized training, I can't just bring on a regular doctor. I have to have a doctor who's certified through Cleveland Clinic. That takes whew, tons of time, tons of conferences. It could take 5 years to get certified because it's such a different type of medicine that we haven't been taught.
Mm. Yeah.
So you definitely want to distinguish yourself, have value,
Yeah.
um, and then have fun because it's really kind of it's like I feel like I'm a detective, just looking a little deeper into the cause of disease, which is fun,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so it's for me, it's easy now that we have the tools. And I got lucky enough to take over Dr. David Perlmutter's office. He was an award-winning neurologist, and he was the first person in Naples to do the same thing 20 years ago. And so he was, reversing cases of like Parkinson's and MS and reducing the rate of Alzheimer's even without medications, like just 20 years ago. So I was just trying to learn from him, and he was trying to, we were just trying to learn from each other essentially when I met him. But that's kind of what got me, what gave me value essentially.
Yeah, that's really smart in regards to you as a doctor, which is so refreshing to hear. Is I'm just looking to add value. And so whenever you have that mindset versus like an order taker, it's like, you give me this, that you tell me what the symptoms are, and I'm going to give you a medicine to fix it. It's like the best way that I could, when I was like asking the question a number of years ago, what's functional medicine? Because I know Joanna's, she is really big into the health, and she's like functional medicine. And then I started getting onto it, and then we connected. But the best way that if you look at functional medicine, it's like a typical doctor would say, you'd go in and say, well, you know what, my my hand's hurting. Well, most doctors would say, okay, well, let me look at your hand and let me give you we'll say
Advil or
Advil
pill
or some sort of pain just to fix the hand. But you'll look deeper. I mean, you might look somewhere at their heart or at their
or the
legs,
gut.
and it's like you're looking at the overall package as to why the hand. And that to me makes a lot of sense. Is there anything you want to add to that? When, for the
No,
listeners out there, what is functional medicine, and is that what I gave? Is that a good reference point?
it's a great point. Yeah, it's a good example. Like, for example, to elaborate on that as a segue, if someone came to me with joint issues, um, and let's say skin issues, now they're having a rash and joint issues. Well, that by definition is kind of like in the autoimmune realm. Well, now I'm thinking, what about the gut? Because 70% of your immune system is in the gut, and no one talks about that. You got 26 feet of intestine trying to block toxic waste from going into your bloodstream. I mean, you have to understand, if I took E. coli from your intestines, which is in your poop, if I took that and put it into your IV, you would die from septic shock. So you have 26 feet of intestine blocking all these toxins from getting to your bloodstream. So that's where most of your immune system is. So think about it. If you have an autoimmune syndrome, what's pissing off your immune system? Is it your gut? Probably. And what in your gut? Is it the wrong bacteria? Is it not enough good bacteria? Because it's like your gut's like a soil field. So if you have grass, which is good bacteria, covering the field, you don't have very many weeds. But if you have a barren field, you get
Mm,
weeds growing everywhere in every
yeah.
direction, and that's kind of what dysbiosis is. A lot of people don't have enough good bacteria because they don't need enough fiber. And so we can identify those problems and we can eradicate bad bacteria, we can eradicate parasites, we can eradicate candida, which is a very common fungus causing autoimmune disease. Also, if you're eating the wrong inflammatory foods, like for example, I have the celiac gene, I have to be very careful with gluten. So if I have the celiac gene, for example, and I have psoriasis, which is a scalp condition, or psoriasis of the elbows or anything like that, or eczema, those are directly linked to gluten consumption. People don't realize that. So
Mm,
people come to me with stuff. I'm like, I know your problem is your skin, but I want a stool test. And they're like,
right.
well, why do I gotta pay that stool
Right.
test? It's $400. Trust me.
Yeah.
And then when I cure them, and then say they want to send me their mom, their dad, their brother, their sister, their father, and that's kind of like how it happens. And
Yeah.
so it's all about taking that extra step and distinguishing yourself. And so people don't mind actually because they're like, I know I have to pay you money, but because you're literally solving the problems that no one else can solve, I don't care because you're the only person that knows how to do it. So that's what makes you distinguish or give you value is that you can actually help people. So I feel like in any field, like for example, if the pool industry, oh my god. So to find a good pool maintenance person, so damn hard. Okay. If someone could tell me, look, we're going to pay 40% more, but we're going to guarantee your pool guy is absolutely out of control, adds value, gives you a printout report, he has your phone number, literally communicates with you what's going on with the pool, I would pay that in a heartbeat because it doesn't exist. So like it's all about adding the value. What's missing in the world? Fix that value, fix it, and you're going to make all the money you could ever imagine without even trying, without even having to advertise.
Yeah. So good. That's such great insight. Now, so entrepreneurs that are out there, they're running. So being healthy is a huge part. I mean, when you look at it, they are we'll say a very valuable asset. Their health is, because if they go down, then their business takes a massive hit. That's very expensive. So we were talking a little bit about how we're starting to see now that actual cancer is starting to increase, and overall health right now is you'd rank actually, well, US, I know Canada is as well, isn't very high from a health standard across the world. What would you recommend to the listeners to, we'll say, the best way to be preventative when it comes down to maybe the nutrition they're doing, or maybe you're starting to see patients coming in and they're doing some sort of negative habit that is impacting them, that that you could mitigate by maybe making a suggestion here?
So first of all, it's a loaded question, but RFK is going to enlighten us with a lot of the food problems that we're having. A lot of people don't realize how much plastic they're getting in their bodies. Microplastics are a real problem, and so most people don't even measure it. I really urge people to do a toxin test with your plastics, because a lot of people are sitting on toxic levels of plastics, and plastics are obesogens, and they're estrogen like compounds. So they're called endocrine disruptors. So they cause people to gain weight. You don't know how many patients, how many women and men come up to me and they're like, I'm in a calorie deficit. I take Ozempic. I don't eat any food. I exercise every day. I don't believe them when they tell me I haven't lost a pound in five and I'm still 230 pounds. I put health coaches on them that literally monitor every single meal they have, and then I realized that they're not lying. It's that their metabolism is not working. And I know for a fact they're full of toxins, for example. So then I check a toxin level. I go, oh my God, you're sitting on all these toxins that are, oh, by the way, some of them are carcinogens. So we're going to get rid of all these toxins and we're going to show you the actual linear regression of every toxin you have in your system, which is incredible to see for anyone. And it takes anywhere from to a year, 3 months to a year. Sometimes it takes a year and a half, depending on how much toxins they have. And then all of a sudden, they lose weight because all these obesogens are out of their system. And all of a sudden, their autoimmune disease goes away. And all of a sudden, they feel better because they were poisoned. They're literally. So I think everyone should take a hard look at what toxins you have. It's different. I do high level genetics. We end up teaching the White House staff, some of them, how to use this tool. And the DoD ended up firewalling our software because it was such sensitive information. I got trained in a tool called Intellex DNA. My mentor was from Harvard. She created a tool. That tool can tell you genetic detox ability, and it's very specific. For example, I'm not picking on Germans. I'm just going to throw it out there. People that have German descent are terrible at detoxing. In general, about half of Germans are going to be full of toxins. It's not their fault. It's just a genetic thing that came from the Germanic tribes. But there's other populations that's like they're very similar. So it's good to know, like, genetically, how do you do with toxins? Because if you don't handle benzene very well, you better never smoke. You better never handle gasoline or work in the gasoline industry. Like, it's good to know like what your genetics are, and it's more than just, for me. It's like, okay, not just do I see your genetics, but does your toxin levels justify and prove that genetics are correct? And every single time, it's yes. Genetics show this. Bam, that's your toxin level. And I've done over 700 reports, and it's just mind blowing. Okay, so that's the first thing I think is pretty cool. You can do your toxin levels, you can do your genetics levels.
Where would they go to get these done?
So if you go to intelexdna.com, you'll find a list of providers around the United States. Intelx, two X's, DNA, created by Dr. Sharon Hausman Cohen from Harvard, and her team. Incredible tool. Um, the environmental toxin test, there's several. One of my favorite is the Vibrant test. It's called the Environmental Total Toxin Test, and I think it's around $700, but worth every single penny. If you don't have the type of money you want to spend, the lesser, I think, there's a $400 test that's just environmental toxins. But these are critical because once you see them, and by the way, these tests, I've run thousands of these, they're so accurate. If you don't do anything different, I can tell my patients are not compliant. 6 months later, the toxins are exactly the same. And I'm like, look, man, obviously you're not taking your pills. So I can call people out. I can get them to comply. It's just mind changing. But so toxins are a big thing, number one. The reason I'm saying about this because a lot of these toxins are carcinogens, and although none of this has been definitively proven, it just makes sense that if you're full of carcinogens, you may have higher cancer. Now, what are we seeing in the United States right now? Well, in the last couple of years, there's been about a 30% increased risk of cancer. And that number is estimated. There's a lot of different estimates. I'm just throwing out 30% as one. And they think that in the next 10 years, there'll be another 30% hike in cancer. Why? Our genetics have not changed in thousands of years. It takes literally thousands of years. So the only thing that could have changed is our environment. What we're concerned about, and people are starting to wonder, is this COVID? Is this long COVID? University of California, San Francisco did a study that a lot of patients with long COVID symptoms and even patients with no symptoms had COVID active viral RNA in their bloodstream 2.5 years later. So if that's happening to people that are even asymptomatic, and Harvard did a similar study also in October 2024. Well, then guess what? Well, COVID can worsen your immune system, right? So theoretically, if your immune system is crippled, you have a high risk for cancer. So could it be long COVID? It's either that or we're getting sprayed with more chemicals than ever, or we're just fatter and metabolically obese, which causes cancer. So there's a lot of theories right now. So what I'm telling my patients is like, look, don't think you're invincible. Get screened and do more screening than you should. For example, you can do a full body MRI for about $1,000. I have caught so many cancers in early stage. Just to put in perspective, Tony Robbins wrote a whole book about this called Fountain Life. And what he found out, and this kind of makes sense, right? If you did a full body MRI on every single patient in the United States past the age of 50, for example, every year, you would probably catch most cancers in stage one. Well, if you caught all the cancers in stage one, you would just cut them out and burn them out or radiate them out, and we would no longer be dying from cancer.
Hmm.
Like, you understand how profound that is? Cancer is the number
Right.
two cause of death. So, anyways, the point is, if you and my patients are all smart enough, business enough, successful enough, affluent enough, where they see the value in it, and they all get MRIs, and so I can see it firsthand, and we're picking up cancer like crazy. So this is just simple things, and MRIs have no radiation. There's nothing toxic about an MRI. It's just loud, and it's if you're claustrophobic, it can be a little annoying, but it's about a 30-minute scan. So I'm just saying, like, everyone should be doing full body MRIs, and I would say past the age of 50, but now we're seeing cancer in younger and younger people, so maybe past the age of 40. Okay, God forbid you have a family history, go even further down, but full body MRIs, even every couple of years, would be smart. You can pick up a cancer down to 2 millimeters in size, which is tiny. So that's a smart thing. Checking your toxins is a smart thing. Checking your genetics is great. I can tell you like what kind of diet you should abide by. There's so many things you can do, but they're not standard of care.
Well, this is where if you look at yourself as an asset, it only makes sense to go in and get tested. For me, the way I look at it is if let's just say you make $100,000 a year, let's just take that for easy math. If you look at yourself as a straight asset, if you're generating $100,000 a year and you look at another investment, maybe that's getting 10% a year, that means you need to invest $1 million in order to make 100,000 a year. So as an asset, you are worth $1 million a year. If you're making $1 million a year, then you're worth $10 million. So the way that I see it is if you have an asset that's worth, a million to 10 million plus and beyond, and you have an asset, does it not make sense to spend a few $100s, if not a few $1,000s each and every year? And that's where with yourself coming in and part of your program, it's like you spend maybe a few $1,000s a year. You get on with somebody really smart. You're investing in your health that way, and you go in and you get these tests on an ongoing basis to maybe catch something early. If you catch something early, you're protecting. It's a form of insurance. And so this is where, investing in your health, getting checked on a regular basis. Dr. Mirstone, I've heard that so many times, not only from you, but from others that's ahead that went in for a test and they caught something early. And they're like, thank God that I caught this early. It's just, why do you think that is? I guess from is it just, do people just get busy? They don't think it's important? Like, why do you think they don't get tested?
Well, culturally, for example, I'm Spanish. My family's from Spain. Spanish people just like to live in denial. This is like a thing from hundreds of years ago. They're too proud. They're same Greek people. Greek people the same way. I'm perfect. I'm not going to the doctor until I die. Like, don't fix it until it's broken. That mentality is horrible because when cancer pop up as a silent killer, you don't even know it's there, and now it's stage 4 and you're dead. Right. So you have to take more of the approaches. Take your head out of the sand and be more aggressive. It's such a key to survival now with the increase in cancer that I swear to you, I literally in the last month have saved 4 patients from death in the last month because we're doing full body MRIs. It's just, and some people, for example, when it comes to mammograms, like women, classic. I don't want to do the mammogram because it's got radiation. Well, how much radiation is a mammogram? It's about as much as getting 6 hours of sunlight. Same thing. So if you've been out in the sun for 6 hours, but you don't want to get a mammogram, you're a hypocrite. Okay. So people need to realize, like, I've had so many women that I beg them to do mammogram. Finally, we pick up a tumor, lumpectomy, and they're saved. And so it's all about balancing and prioritizing yourself. And like life gets busy, but like, why take out a disability insurance on yourself? But yet you can't save yourself. I mean, wouldn't you rather make money and live with your family than just depend on disability if something happens or life
No.
insurance? If you think about like strategically how much more money you would make by keeping yourself alive versus life insurance policy, it's monumentous.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And people don't realize this, but this trend's not going to get better; it's going to get worse, according to all statistics we see. And so just get yourself checked. It's just pennies, it's pennies. I think that most people once they do this, and then the problem is I've seen this so many times where my patients will preach this to someone and then they will ignore it. And then 2 years go by, and now they have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And they're like, oh my God, I wish I'd listened to you. I would have nipped this in the butt and we would have been done with this conversation. So it's kind of sad. Like, you got to react or you can pay for it. And it's not pretty. And stage 4 treatment is not good. It's not good. Our prognosis for most stage 4s is terrible. So guess what? Our prognosis for most stage 1s are amazing. Literally, you cut it out, you're done. And I had this one woman. I don't know how this happened. And by the way, sometimes when you get older, the oncogenes start to turn on. Everyone has cancer genes, and sometimes they turn on. So this woman, I remember she was around 68, super nice woman, and she sunbathed a lot. And I don't think it was from that, but because she didn't burn, she just got sun. But she comes in my office. I beg her to do a colonoscopy. She says no. I said, okay, do a Cologuard. It's a simple stool test, checks you for colon cancer. It came back positive. She went to the colon doctor, did a colonoscopy. She had colon cancer super early, had her gut colon cut out, was back out of the hospital in 2 weeks like nothing happened, saved her from colon cancer. A month later, I begged her, because she hadn't done screening like in 5 years, to do a mammogram. She does that. Tumor, stage 1, breast cancer, lumpectomy. I mean, what are the chances? This woman had two stage 1 cancers in the same couple months. We picked both of them up, and now you can tell she is like, oh my God, I'm alive. Thank you so much. And she'll do anything I say now. So every year, we're doing MRI, we're doing mammogram. So it's like, for a cost of a couple $1,000s, you've ensured that you're safe, you're healthy. And it's just stuff like that people need to prioritize. They need to step up to the plate and go, okay, I'm going to do this and get it done. And that's the problem, is people are either reluctant to pay the money, or they don't really believe in the science. They don't understand it. But when you logically look at it, it's worth every penny. It's worth every penny, you know?
It's a great investment. Now, where do you think all this is going? I mean, you see technology, AI, coming into the space right now, and you're starting to see a shift. I mean, with Kennedy coming in, and Trump just announced him as he's going to be one of their head guys on the health side. And so, where do you see this going from a health? You had mentioned this is in the short term, anyways. This is looking to maybe exacerbating to grow. But do you ever see cancer being fully healed? Like, do you see it going that way eventually, or where's this all going from a health standpoint?
So
Another
I
big
have
question for you. That's
a
a
huge
loaded
question.
one.
It's a
Yeah.
huge question. So some of the cancer technologies are starting to get better. They're starting to develop cancer vaccines, which, imagine, you can literally vaccinate yourself against cancer. Like, that would be incredible. So they're starting to finally, I think, figure out how to prevent this better. But it's like 10 years down the line, maybe 20 years down the line. I've heard of filter technology that they have, where they actually can filter your bloodstream and take out all the circulating tumor cells, which is quite incredible. So they're starting to develop different technologies that are just at the forefront. To give you an idea, I had a patient of mine who had stage 4 base of throat cancer, and he had nothing left, and he was dying. Mayo Clinic tried everything, chemo, radiation, and everything. So he was basically on, death's door. He had about 6 months to live, and he was refusing further chemo, radiation, because it was so bad. And we somehow got him in a trial with one of these experimental filters, and it cost him an arm and a leg. I think he has to spend $50,000 per filtration, and so he's done 4 so far. And now the University of Oklahoma is studying it formally for pancreatic cancer. He's still alive. We have 3 PET scans that have been done after each filtration, and all of his tumors have shrank to almost nothing. His SUV index on the PET scans are minimal, which means they're not active. So this guy's living testimony to some of ththese crazy technologies are going to help one day. We just don't know how to use them completely. We're still learning. We think you have to be in early stage 4 for some of these to work. We're just learning about some of these creatures, but there's amazing technology that will be available in our lifetime, that we
Yeah.
will have access to. So maybe we kill cancer once and for all in the next 10 or 15 years. Until then, you better catch it early.
Yeah, better
I'll say.
catch it early. That's such great counsel, great wisdom. One of the
Yeah.
books you told me to read when we first met was Lifespan by Andy
Yeah,
Sinclair.
that's the one. That's what I meant. Sorry. Yes. Thank you.
And so this book, so I went and read it, and to me, it was like, okay, I'm going to get through the book. There's a lot of medical jargon in there for those of you that aren't in. But if you go to the back of the book, he basically has a breakdown of what he suggests in order to expand your life. And so, actually, Eddie, that from that book, and I was started to implement and started to pick up some of the suggestions. So, in order to expand your life, and a lot of this stuff has been tested out there now, what would you suggest out there? I know NMN was one of those suggestions there, Andy Sinclair. And you could just go on and Google Andy Sinclair and you see this guy. I think he's like in his mid 50s, right? And he looks like he's in his 30s. It's unbelievable. He has a lot of talks on there, Andy Sinclair. But maybe you want to talk a little bit about that because that was something that really stuck with me, and I've started implementing that in my life. Just seeing it as I'm seeing myself as an asset, and if I can not only like longevity but healthy longevity, right? I don't want to stay alive for another 20 years but be sick. But some of the stuff there that's helping with longevity. Do you have anything to add in that department?
So longevity is still in its infancy, and so as a medical doctor, we can only recommend things that are really established. And so there are a lot of NAD precursors that are being studied, NMN, NR, NAD, and there's a lot of promising data and a lot of promising trials. But then we also don't know the full effect of them. Like, can they potentially, if you have cancer and you take them, will that worsen? So we can't really officially recommend them, unfortunately, quite yet. Although we think there's promise for sure. And yeah, there are people like David Sinclair who are very public. He's a dean of genetics at Harvard, and he's taken NMN for 15, 20 years at a gram a day. And he looks, and from a biological standpoint, he reports to be 20 years younger, and he looks like he's 20 years younger, so it kind of makes sense. But I think the main thing that people can take home today is the number three, one, two, and three tenet: how to not die, and this is key, right? Number one cause of death in the United States is a heart attack. Number two is cancer. Number three is stroke, right? So, and number four could be physician error, actually. And number four might replace number three.
Mhm.
So make sure you get a good doctor.
Right.
Takes
Yeah.
his time with you, because when doctors are stressed and they're seeing 40 patients a day, it's easy to make a mistake. So sometimes it's better to invest in a doctor that takes time with you. But anyways, the point is, listen to this. How do you prevent heart attack? Well, everybody, in my opinion, at the age of 40 should get a CT coronary score. It's $75. It literally just checks for calcium in your coronary arteries. It's such a simple test. If that test is zero, there's an 80% chance that you don't have any plaque at all in your heart. There's still a 20% chance you have a little bit of fatty plaque that you can't really see as well, but that's, taking an 80% odds is pretty good. And then watch your cholesterol. You can do stress tests. You can do, I mean, listen, I talked to an interventional cardiologist in Naples. You can do a cardiac stress test for $150. You're in your 40s or 50s, do a cardiac stress test. Make sure your heart's good. It's super simple. That's how you don't die from a heart attack. You find it early, and you find it early, you can reverse it. So no one has to die from a heart attack, just to be aware of what's going on. Number two, cancer. We talked about that. Full body MRIs, super simple. And then obviously all the regular screening, like for men, PSA, for women, breast cancer screening, mammograms, some basic stuff, colonoscopies, of course. And obviously run all this by your doctor. Number three, how do you prevent a stroke? Everyone should get a carotid ultrasound. Make sure your heart is, your carotids are clear. You have no plaque buildup in your main. You have four arteries that feed your brain, two carotids and two vertebrals. Make sure the carotids are clear. And then, make sure your heart's not doing any funny stuff, funny rhythms every so often. Go to a cardiologist and just have them do an EKG. If you get an eye watch, it'll tell you if your heart's in a funny rhythm that can cause stroke. So literally, there's so many things you can do to prevent the number one, number two, and number three, and number four causes of death. Well, there you go. That's like literally how you live to 100. And the blue zones in the United States, that's what they do. They live longer, right? Because they have less heart attacks, because they have less strokes. So emulate blue zones, become active, eat more good foods, more olive oil, less omega 6s, more omega 3s, have a glass of wine here and there with your meal to absorb resveratrol, max 7 per week. Do not become an alcoholic, because that'll just counter the benefit. But the point is, there's so many things you can do for longevity just to improve it. Look at blue zones.
Yeah.
Walk, take a 2-hour lunch from time to time. Is there so much stuff you can do? And we can actually measure your rate of aging now, which is completely insane. Again, it's not FDA approved, not been proven in huge clinical studies. But like, if you watch the documentary "Don't Die" with Brian Johnson, he says he ages about 7 months and 12 months. So he ages 7 months biologically in 12 calendar months, and
Hmm.
he can measure that with a true age diagnostic blood swab. And so it's fascinating. I can take patients, do the swab, look at their rate of aging, change their lifestyle, and sure enough, the number comes down. So I can't guarantee it's accurate, but it seems like it's pretty accurate. That's all I can say is it seems like it's pretty on point because it correlates with their lifestyle, their changes in diet, their changes in supplements. So I think you can do a lot of stuff that people are not doing yet. Again, that's what's distinguishing what we do from other people because we're not just doing, hey, what's your blood pressure? What's you have diabetes? You don't? Okay, take this medicine. Okay, I'll see you in 6 months. That's a 5 minute visit.
Well, one of the things that I love about how you're running your business is, I mean, it's based on helping and providing a lot of value to your patients, but it's not based on what you learned in university, like what the book says. You're thinking like common sense in the sense of what's the challenge? Okay, there might be another solution out here for it. It's not just one size fits all. It's thinking big picture there, and then you're open to looking at a variety of different options that it could be. And I think by doing that, that's what's giving you this high success rate. And you're just seeing, I mean, you're changing people's lives, right? And I think that to me is at the heart of any really strong entrepreneur is really looking at serving the clients, but then thinking outside the box is like, how can I do it better? And consistently looking at making it better versus this is the way that we've always done it before. And unfortunately, I think most people have run up against that with their doctor. Maybe they assessed them, and they were incorrect. And it was just like this, or they went to 7 doctors before, and you're seeing that they're coming to you after going to all these different doctors, and they're all I've had this before where they've assessed multiple different, they didn't come in with a standard, okay, here's what it is. It was like different assessments. And so I think that's where having somebody there that's curious like yourself, I think that's like so important when you're selecting who your doctor is, because that's one of the most important power team members when it comes down to protecting your asset, your largest asset, most expensive asset, which is yourself, right?
Yeah, 100%. And just a classic example, like the average primary care physician will just check your cholesterol and say, well, if your cholesterol is in line and you don't meet these risk factors that they calculate into like a Framingham score or cardiac risk score, you're good. And you don't need cholesterol medicine, you're good. And for other people to say, no, you need statins. Well, why don't you just take anyone, even with regular cholesterol, and do a CT scan? Because I have tons of patients that have perfect cholesterol levels, yet they're building plaque, but they wouldn't be picked up in the current system unless I ran that extra test. So there's a benefit to overscreening, and then there's people that say, well, if you overscreen, you pick up extra stuff. You pick up cysts, you pick up blood that have to be monitored now, and it's a nuisance. Okay, a little bit sometimes, but in my experience, it's been overwhelmingly positive and way, 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 way more benefit than any tiny risk. And if I pick up a little cyst in the pancreas that could be precancerous and I have to monitor that from time to time, who cares? I'm just protecting them from getting pancreatic cancer. So I think there's a lot of benefit to this. There's very few downfalls other than you have to pay for it. Hopefully, eventually, it's covered by insurance. But I think to any entrepreneur out there, get creative, get passionate, look for solutions, think outside the box, use common sense, and you'll find so much to do. You just have to be willing to say, "Hey, I'm going to offer you something above
Above
what
and
you
beyond.
normally get," and that's huge. That's all you got to do.
All right. Well, I got 3 last questions here for you that we're going to do in rapid fire. All right. First one is, what's your favorite book that's made the biggest impact in your life?
Until now, Dr. David Sinclair from Harvard, the guy we just talked about,
Yeah.
um, why we age and why we don't have to.
Hmm.
In that book, he describes how he takes laboratory mice that are literally old and decrepit and about to die because they only live about 2 years. And these mice happen to be female and they were menopausal. He gives them massive doses of NMN. They actually go back in time, become fertile, have babies, and then live 2 to 3 times longer, which is so mind blowing. If you were translating to that human, maybe a 75-year-old woman going back to 25 years old, having some babies, and then live until like 140 years old.
Hmm. Unbelievable.
So it doesn't make sense, right? But they're doing it in animals. So that gave me hope for humanity, hope for longevity, hope for the science, and that type of stuff is really what motivates me.
Very cool. All right, 3 words that best describe you.
Curious, courageous, and confident.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I got that.
you
Well
gotta you
done.
gotta have confidence if
Yeah.
you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You know.
Yeah, no, that's it for sure. And I think for you, it's the massive amount of studying that you do to back up and
Yep.
your experience as well is what helps give you that confidence for sure. And then final question, what final advice would you give a maybe a young entrepreneur or an entrepreneur that wants to take their business to the next level? What final advice would you have for them?
You know, I believe in God, spirituality, timing, synchronicity, all these things. I think if you want something, pray for it, try to get the right divine timing so that the things occur in your life that lead up to the right situation, get you educated in that field.
Mm,
You don't know how many times I would literally wonder about something and 2 weeks later be sitting right next to an expert in that field. I'm like, are
mm,
you kidding me?
right.
So I think life will nudge you, God, energy, whatever you call it, will nudge you into the direction you need to be in, as long as you have the right intentions. You're really trying to help people. You're trying to do the right thing. It's not about the money. Money will come. It's about doing what you like. Because at the end of the day, you're gonna die. Doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank account. You better have a good life. You better enjoy what you do. So, like, do what you like. Find your passion. Ask for help. Be humble. Basically, be very humble. Learn as much as you can from as many experts as you can, and then you will be confident because you'll have learned more than anyone else.
That's such great advice. So, how can the listeners get a if they wanted to reach out? I know you just have another physician that came on, so you have limited spots
Yep.
that you guys are willing to take on. What's the best way that a listener can reach out if they wanted to connect?
So if they go to obviously my website's maristanymedical.com. There's information. They can put their email there. They can send us emails. They can call our office. We have an Instagram page as well. But basically, I do have a nurse practitioner that's taking patients now because we had been backlogged for a while, and I can only take a very few limited concierge patients at a time, but she's taking a ton of patients per week right now, and she's a lot less expensive than I am, which is also a great advantage. And I oversee all her consults to make sure she's doing it at the same level that I am. So I think it's good to be able to extend yourself and do it appropriately and affordably for patients. And that's the thing. We're going to add even more value now by making it more affordable, which is even better. So yeah, I think that's a great thing. If anyone needs it, they can even email info@maristanymedical.com and get set up with my staff directly through there too.
So, such a great conversation here. Really appreciate it, Dr.
Well, thank you, man.
Maristany.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Such wisdom there for our listeners, and really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for coming on the show.
Likewise, it's always a blast to hang out, man. Thank you.
Yeah, right on. Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you like the show, go ahead and share and subscribe to the channel where we are building a community of up and coming entrepreneurs. And remember, the fastest way to build wealth is to grow your business and invest in real estate. And by the way, we are getting closer to our next acquisition. We're actually looking at Atlanta. And if you are interested in investing into real estate, go to fariscapitalpartners.com. Check us out there, and be sure to get on a reservation list as we are coming up with our next deal soon. And we do have limited spots there as well. So love you guys and keep on going full out.